Hey, what's up, everybody? Cheyenne Perry here with the Lean In podcast, where everyone has a story to tell. It's time to lean in, listen, and learn from the stories that are shared. Let's get it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Cheyenne Perry here with the Lean In podcast. Today we have a wonderful friend of mine. Some people call him the man, the myth, the legend. But Mr. Bill Comai will join us today. Bill, how you doing today?
Excellent, Cheyenne. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, doing well. So I'm really glad to have you on here and be able to hear just more of your story and how we can lean in, listen, and learn from that. So thank you for being here today. Bill, I want to go right to it. So can you share just what's your testimony? How did God redeem you and walk us through that?
Oh, it is. It's the biggest question. So I had an interesting faith journey. I kind of grew up around church. I had a very loving, supportive family. I had been around church quite a bit in high school. Never really stepped across the line of faith. And when I left for college, I had no real faith to speak of. I believed in God. Right? If you had asked me, I would have said, "Well, yeah, I believe in God," but I didn't really understand the gospel. I had no sense of I need a savior. Even the idea of needing a savior, right? Like that flies in the face of my pride, which was a big issue at the time. So, I kind of went about life. My wife, Krista, and I started dating in high school, and we actually both ended up going to Western Michigan University together. We broke up after our freshman year, actually kind of midway through our freshman year, because I'm a complete moron. And at the time, it was just an absolute disaster of a human being. I mean, I was prideful, arrogant. I partied really hard, and it just wasn't anything that was conducive to what she wanted to be around. And so we broke up for a number of years, and actually didn't even speak to each other for probably 4 years. And we had kind of found our way back together through some different circumstances that are in the extended version of this, maybe. And we kind of reconnected. And so, long story short, Krista and I got married. We right after we graduated, we moved down to Florida. And when we got down there, as adults, right? Like, so now we're adults. We're not college kids anymore. We're trying to figure out life. She says, "Hey, listen, we're probably going to have kids, and I'd like our kids to grow up in church, and we need to find some place to be." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, let's go check it out." So we visited a couple places in the community that we moved to, and I just kept coming back. I'm like, "Hey, I just can't do this. Like, this is so boring. I cannot see myself doing this forever." One thing that was different though is everywhere we would go, we kept getting invited to this church called the Journey Church. Everywhere we go, you couldn't go to the grocery store without getting invited to the Journey Church. I couldn't go to the gym without getting invited to the Journey Church. And this would have been before I would have recognized God's hand in things, right? So I'm just going about business, but I'm going, hey, maybe we should go check out this church. And so we did, and we went and visited it one day. It was in an old Kmart building. And, even in my arrogance, Cheyenne, we pulled up. I'm like, this isn't even a real church. Like, this isn't a strip mall. And we go walking in, but man, I'll tell you what, like I had never experienced anything like that. So for me, all of a sudden the music was good. Like not kind of good, it was really good. And the people were super friendly and they seemed so genuine. The pastor would get up there and preach, and I'm like, this actually makes sense to me. Like, how many sermons I've sat through that just didn't make any sense to me. And so, God really used that to kind of set the hook. And we continued attending that church. And in December of that year, we went to church one day. We had some friends in town from Michigan. We had gone out the night before and had quite a bit of fun. We showed up to church. I was a little bit hungover, and I'll never forget it though, because that day, I couldn't tell you to this day, Cheyenne, what the sermon was about. But we got to the end of that sermon, and the pastor gives an altar call, and it was almost an out of body experience. Like for the first time ever, I felt compelled to pray. For the first time ever, I felt compelled to kind of surrender is what I would call it now, right? And I didn't have language for it at the time, but that moment, that day, I stepped across the line of faith for the first time and recognized like I am an absolute disaster. I need help, and that was kind of the defining line. And then what God did from there is, he started to do a number on my heart. Man, he surrounded me with some great people. I was very fortunate to have some mature believers come into my life right away and disciple me. And but it really is nothing short of miraculous to look at. The prideful, arrogant, violent. I had a bad temper. I was ready to fight whenever. Like who I was before Christ and what He's done in my heart is something only He could do. And so, God used a lot of circumstances. He used marriage. He used a move across the country. He used invite after invite after invite. He used years, I'm sure, of faithful prayer on the part of my family. Praying that I would listen up. So, and ever since then, it's just been one adventure after.
Man, yeah, praise God, man. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, from darkness to light. That's yeah, clear evidence of God's provision and His grace upon you. So thanks for sharing that too. So I know you had some experience in the church world. You've been helping churches, different capacities, whether it's guest speaking at a church or helping start a church plant. By way of helping churches, where did that originate from? How did that kind of stir within you? Like, I want to be able to help churches to succeed.
Yeah, God, to this day, God is doing amazing things, and it was a church plant, funny enough. So I wouldn't have known what that was, but when we showed up, that church had been around for maybe, I think, not quite 3 years. And so even by church planting standards, that's still pretty much a baby church. And but it was growing rapidly. They were seeing God do some miraculous, amazing things in people's lives, and I think that was part of what drew me in. Like God knew that I needed to see that because I had never seen anything like that, where people were coming to faith and being baptized. Marriages were being restored. Generosity was being poured out. People were preaching the gospel at their workplace. Like I'd never seen anything like it. And so, in the context of that church, come around me early in my faith, and they knew a little bit about me as they got to know me, and my background was in education, and so they had kind of pulled me into slowly, some opportunities to utilize my education background, and so it wasn't long before I had some opportunities to help with some discipleship classes and to do some teaching behind the scenes as I was kind of maturing in my own faith, and a couple years into that. I get this text from our pastor's assistant. She said, "Hey, Pastor Daryl and Carol are wondering if you and Crystal would do dinner with them. Could we try to put a date together?" And I'm thinking we did something wrong. I'm like, I don't know what we did, but I don't know why Pastor wants to meet with us. So I'm thinking, man, I said something stupid, or we did something wrong, or whatever. And at the time, I was actually in the police academy in Jacksonville, Florida. So, I've got a whole different parallel track of life going on. Okay, at this time, and so we take the dinner invite and we go, and our pastor said, he's like, "Hey, listen, you know the church was growing rapidly at the time. We were in the midst of just seeing a lot of people come to faith and a lot of people come to church, and a lot of people engage in the mission." And so he said, we're looking at establishing this new role, which would be a connections pastor. Some places might call it like an assimilation pastor. It's very process driven. It's not super pastoral, right? It's process driven, but basically creating a process for first time guests to become, full blown, fully functioning members of the body of Christ. We needed a process. And so that was, he said, "We'd like to offer you this job." I'm like, "What?" I didn't eat. That's the only meal I've ever been in, but I didn't finish my food. And I was so caught off guard. And then there was a kicker. Kicker was, in addition to this connections ministry, there's a young adults ministry that needs somebody to lead it too for 18 to 30-year-olds. And that's kind of part of the package. And, we walked away from that dinner praying about it. I really felt a strong conviction to say yes, because to me, at that stage in my faith, I'm looking at it going, man, if we look at scripture, and this is what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to make sure as many people go to heaven as possible. In our time here on earth, it's the only time that we get to co-labor with Jesus to do this. What else would I do, right? Like, seems like nothing else really matters. And this was about 2 weeks before I graduated from the police academy. So I went home. Krista and I prayed about it. We talked about it. Felt like it was the right call, and said yes. And that kind of brought me into full-time vocational ministry. I didn't see that coming, and I played that role for a number of years. Again, the short version of that would be, over the years, I kind of started to pick up additional roles within the church, and I was part of our teaching team at a certain point there as well, where I was preaching on Sundays and leading in different ways within the church. That led to Krista and I feeling like God was calling us to launch something new. We were a part of a rapidly growing church that was just on fire for Jesus, and growth was part of it, and multiplication was part of it, and that was very much becoming part of the DNA of that church. And so we came to a point where we felt like God was calling us to launch something new. We went and sought counsel on that, and prayer and guidance, and our pastors and our church leaders said, absolutely, we feel like this is the right move. And that kind of got us started off on. And again, I could go down a completely different tangent on church planting, but that got us started in that. It's actually what brought us back to Michigan. And from that, though, was birthed just a passion for church planting. I love church planters. They're crazy. You have to be a little bit crazy to do it. I think God has a special call for those guys and girls, that are doing that. But I think for me, though, it was really birthed out of that experience to say, I love the local church. I know what the local church can be when it is just fully alive and surrendered to Jesus, how it can impact communities. When we really catch a glimpse of this Holy Spirit-filled force to be reckoned with that is the local church, when it's healthy and functioning, it's amazing. Like there's nothing else like it. And I have a deep passion for seeing that everywhere. So yeah, that's where I would leave it for now, I guess. There's a lot to that journey, but that's kind of how it came about.
Okay. Man, that's pretty cool. And you were in the police academy. That's even man, that's a whole nother rabbit trail of just the mentality and physicality of getting through the academy. That's pretty cool. But
Well, it was, man. I've God has reeled me back from a few different paths. It's one of the reasons why, when I part of leading a young adults ministry is a lot of questions about, like, what am I going to do when I grow up, right? And adults ask the same question. I just preached on this a couple weekends ago at a church here in Pigeon. It's the will of God for my life, right? Like, how do we know what the will of God for our life is? And we can really get off in the weeds on that. We can be convinced that there's just one path that God has for us. And when you look at Proverbs talk about submitting all your ways to Him and lean not on your own understanding and seek His will in all that you do. And if you do, He'll make your path straight. It's paths, by the way. It's not one path. It's paths. God knows you're going to screw up, right? God knows you're going to go down some paths you're not supposed to go on. And the same God who will swallow up Jonah in a fish and spit him out on shore where He wants him to be will bring you back from the wrong path should you find yourself down there. God is not shocked by our poor decision making. So I say that to say, I went to the Marine Corps the summer after my freshman year of college. That was kind of part of my journey there. I went to the police academy in Jacksonville, Florida. And had fully committed a number of times to kind of go down this warrior path. God has reeled me back from that every single time I've tried to go down that path. And
wow.
One of the craziest stories, Cheyenne, is that I forgot about actually is when we met with our pastors for that job offer. I had actually been processing with the Florida Highway Patrol. So my wife and I went down. We lived up in Northeast Florida, a little town called Fernandina Beach. I had been processing with the Florida Highway Patrol. We went down to Orlando. And if you know anything about the Florida Highway Patrol, it's similar to the Michigan State Police, right? If you take a role with them, you're not going home. You're going to Orlando. You're either going to go down to Mickey, you're going to go to Tallahassee. Those are the two options. And you're going to live there for a while, and then you might be able to go back home at some point. And we went down to Orlando fully committed to this direction, knowing that we were going to have to walk away from some stuff. Keep in mind, this is before the job offer from the church. Mm-hmm. Nobody had said a word to me about this job offer. So we go down to Orlando. I go in and my wife drops me off. I go in for this processing thing, and there's hundreds of people in the room, and there's this guy doing his spiel up in front, and he's done it 100 times, right? And he's going through, and then he said something that caught my attention. He goes, so listen, you're probably not going to stay where you're at. You're going to have to move. So if you can't leave that good church, and I'm sitting down, I look up, I'm like, what did he just say? If your wife can't leave, that spouse can't leave that good job that they have. I'm like, what? He's like, so if you've got friends and family in this place that you're at and you don't think you can walk away from it, this might not be. And he's going on and on about this on this list. But the first one was church. And I'm thinking, I've spent enough time in law enforcement circles to know that's not a conversation that happens all that often. Right? I did the most manly thing I've ever done, Cheyenne. I snuck to the bathroom and I hid in the bathroom stall and I called my wife on the phone and I said, you got to come get me. This isn't right. So she comes and picks me up. And I found out when I got in the car, I didn't know this, okay? She had been at the hotel praying, God, if this isn't right for us, pull him out. And I don't mean she was doing that 5 minutes before I called her. I mean she was doing it when I called her, praying, God, if this isn't right, pull him out. I go hide in the bathroom. I call her, come get me. This isn't right. We go home, and it's the following week that then pastor comes and says, hey, listen, we want to offer you this job.
Come on. Yeah.
So
Only
he's
God.
faithful. He's faithful.
Man, that's incredible. Praise God. I love those stories. Just like only God, right? Only God.
Only. Yeah.
Only. And so you've spoken to a number of churches by way of filling in and preaching sermons. Bill, walk us through what does that look like to sermon prep for a Sunday morning message?
Yeah. Well, at this point, for the first 3 years of our church plant down in Metro Detroit, I preached 52 weeks a year. So, I have to say, like, for one thing, you do it enough, your process changes, but you also have a very good library of things that you've taught on. And while I don't think that you should always recycle sermons, I think that revisiting what God has already shown you about things is also important. And so, you do that you have a couple hundred sermons banked up. You've walked through some text, you've got some journal notes, you've got some ideas. And so I have to say that that's a big part of it. There's always something I look back at first and go, okay, I think I preached on this back in 2016. I'm going to go look at like where were we at that point? What was God saying at that point? So that's part of the process for sure. The flip side of that, though, I think is if you're always spending time in the word and you're always spending time in prayer, God is going to be showing you something that that sometimes is worth repeating. And so I think that if I were to say what the process looks like today, looks a lot different than it did, those years ago, but it's going to start with prayer and the word, because ultimately at the end of the day, my prayer is always going to be, God, hide me behind the cross. Whatever I say, I want it to be holy and pleasing to you. I want it to be consistent with your word. And so it starts there. But I would say that the two big variables that I would add into that equation would be, number one, talk to people. So if I'm going to be going to speak at a church, I want to talk to some people that go to that church and ask, like, what's going on? Hey, what's real for you guys right now? What are you guys experiencing right now? Some of the best advice I ever got early on in preaching, Cheyenne, I had a guy in Florida who was helping me with some sermon prep for that young adults ministry that I led. And I remember one time showing up to a meeting with him with all these notes in a big old study survey from Barna. Barna, the Barna Group? So Barna Group does all the stats for church life, and they're going to tell you everything you need to know, right? Statistically speaking. So I show up with this big, long list of topics and all this stuff that we're going to cover in this young adults ministry, because according to Barna, this is what 18 to 30-year-olds are interested in. Well, not that there's anything wrong with research. I think that's important. But he asked me a very powerful question that has dramatically changed how I view sermon preparation to this day. He said, Bill, who's asking you these questions? I go, what do you mean who's asking me these questions? Who in your young adults ministry has asked you about this or this or this? I'm like, well, nobody, but this is what Barna says they want to know.
Right.
And he said, Bill, you can prep a whole bunch of sermons on topics that nobody's asking about. because you can sermon prep based on surveys, right, and data, or you can sermon prep based on relationship. And there is no substitute for sermon prep based on relationship and conversation. So I would say it starts with prayer and the word without question, has to. From there, it's going to be, hey, where am I going, and what's real for those people right now? And then in that, God starts to kind of triangulate things a little bit, right? And then I go back and I look, hey, what has God told me through this text before, and how might that apply today? And then in that kind of swirling of things there, the Holy Spirit speaks. And so that's, I guess, in a nutshell, that's kind of how I approach it now.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's good. That's good. Good pieces of advice. So for those who are also preaching at churches, that's a good approach to have. So I appreciate that. So
Yeah,
that's good. I want to veer into from ministry into leadership and athletics. So you're the AD at Laker Schools, and so talk to us about you having experience of being a pastor. How does that reshape how you lead athletes and coaches today?
a lot. If you kind of catalog my leadership journey, I went to the Marine Corps the summer after my freshman year of college. I went to the police academy in Jacksonville. Those are environments where leadership is highly mission focused. Okay. So a lot of my early, less mature, I think, leadership moments are rooted in something that for me, it can be a gift, it can be a strength. I am highly mission driven, highly mission driven. Um, Now, left unchecked, that becomes a liability. And because what it does is you will bulldoze people in the name of the mission. And that includes the mission of Jesus, by the way. There are plenty of people, myself included, I'm people, who over the years have bulldozed people in pursuit of the mission of Jesus. I did that early on in my ministry leadership because I didn't know any better. I brought a style of leadership in that I had experienced that works for me. So I can handle people getting in my face. I can handle high accountability. I can handle a little bit of yelling and a little bit of tussling, right? I can handle that and then go do my job. Not everybody, in fact, most people can't, right? And so what I
Yeah,
learned early on after running off the leadership teams of people, because I would bulldoze people in the name of the mission. So over the years in ministry, um, God refined that a lot for me to recognize that people matter more than the mission. So I think now when I look at how I interact and deal with coaches and parents and athletes, it's it's changed it to more of a like a people first. The roles are similar but different. I think that in ministry you recognize that like people are messy. In an education you recognize that people are messy, right? The variable that you don't really have so much of in education or athletics is, in the church, at least we're rallying everybody around Jesus for the most part, right? You don't really get that on this side of things. That's a little harder to, because you never know where people stand in faith or if they have any faith at all. And so, you have to be cognizant of that when you're dealing with people. But I think that if ministry taught me anything, or if it influenced my leadership in any way, it really is it tapered that edge of missional drivenness to be more people focused and say, I can honestly tell you now after years of screw ups, I care more about people than I do mission.
yeah.
People are the mission, right? So we can have really cool mission statements and really great goals, and all that stuff is important, but people are the mission.
That's good. Be part of the mission. That's good. That's good. So as far as lessons from ministry that translates into athletics, what would you say those? What would you say that would be as far as lessons learned and how you translate it to from ministry into your athletics?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of them. I don't know which one I would land on 100% to say, but I think that it has given me an optimistic outlook on conflict. I think is one of the more important ones, and that's not something that everybody has. So I think that by and large, right now in our culture, we really have lost the ability to disagree on things. I think that we're just not super good at that. We have a lot of voices feeding that, like, the way we see it should be the right way. So that translates into a lot of what I bring to the equation in the athletic sense, that is, I don't know that it exists everywhere, is, in a church, conflict resolution is always coming to the table with an optimistic outlook. right? That we're going to figure this out. Like we might not agree, but we're going to, we're going to come to an understanding. I view athletics the same way. So when people are coming in, and this may shock you, Cheyenne, as a coach, I know most of my conversations as an athletic director with adults and coaches, and well, more so with adults and with athletes, are not always happy conversations, right? They're usually difficult conversations. Coaches, not so much. I talk to our coaches all the time. So those are usually very good conversations. But if a parent or a player is talking to me directly or coming to me for something, it usually means something is wrong. It usually means someone is not able to participate in something, right? Like it usually means there's a disciplinary conversation. And so a lot of what I deal with on a daily basis are those fires. I am always coming into those conversations with a hopeful, optimistic point of view that says, guys, listen, we don't need to walk out of here in agreement because we're really not going to, right? Especially in these circumstances with athletics, you're not going to agree with the policy all the time, but this is what it is, right?
Yep.
And to be able to salvage the relationship in the midst of disagreement and difficulty and frustration and pain and disappointment, being able to salvage those relationships, I think that's a big thing that ministry taught me that I try to carry over into all of my dealings with athletics, because that's not super normal. That's not super
Right.
normal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good too. How did you, side note here, how did you get the job at Lakers as the athletic director?
Only God, man. So let's see, it would have been in 2019. Okay, so 2019-ish, beginning early 2020. I had started toying with the idea of bivocational ministry. And so for people who don't understand bivocational ministry, it's kind of the idea that like you're not just a pastor, like you're doing something else for work, right? We were a part of a network out of Chicago called New Think Network that plants churches all over the world, and we were very active in that. We had been a part of some key cohorts. We're looking at some network building in Metro Detroit for church planting and reproducing local churches, and so we were super active in this. Our church was at a place where leadership wise, we had a fantastic team. We had really good process in place. Things were going really well, and I felt like you know, I could really kind of creatively approach ministry where, hey, maybe we free up some resources for the church and we relieve a little bit of burden on payroll, whatever the case may be. But I've got some other things I can go do in the work or in the marketplace and still lead a church kind of at the same time. And I got kind of obsessed with that idea. And so I started looking around at that. I started asking some questions. And I actually, so I started processing with the Detroit Police Department. Again, right? I'm going back. I'm going, hey, listen, there's a few things that I'm pretty good at, and I kind of have a knack for this. And so I'm going to go. The Detroit Police Department at the time was doing a huge hiring spree. So I went down. I would have had to have gone through the academy again because it had been so long since I had gone through Florida, and but I was ready. My wife and I talked about it. We prayed about it. Felt like let's do this. Let's give it a shot. So I did, and went through, finished all my testing. I get a phone call from the Detroit Police Department on a random, let's call it a Thursday, I don't know, and said, hey, listen, everything's good to go. Your file's going with a detective. They're going to kind of usher it through the final steps of the process, but you should hear from us within about a week. I'm like, cool. The next day, 24 hours later, I get a call, and they say, we're no longer considering your application for employment. There was a big hiring quota that they had hit. There were all kinds of things that were happening that were
Wow.
no longer there. And within 24 hours, I went from, hey, we'll talk to you in a week to, yeah, man, listen, we'll hold your application, but right now there's nothing going on, kind of
Mm.
thing. And I was devastated, Diane. In case you are not picking up on the score here, I had gone down this road a number of times. I was really close to it. This had been like a dream of mine to be in law enforcement, and I could taste it. And again, God closes the door, and I'm like, what is going on right now? So that conversation had started. Now, fast forward a little bit of time here, and I had a few people shot me a job posting for this vacancy at Lakers School, which is obviously where I graduated from. My wife and I both graduated from Lakers. So, we had never considered coming back home. We were good. Things were good. Like things were great. I had no reason to leave other than God had kind of planted this seed in my heart. So I I looked at the job posting. Kristen and I talked about it, prayed about it, and I very quietly I let our church leadership team know, and in my family, and that was really it. And I snuck up here very quietly in December of it would have been um, probably 2019, I think. No, 2020, December of 2020, and I snuck up here. I think it was December 16th, very quietly for an interview. They interviewed 16 people for the job. Before I got back to Livonia, because I still lived in Livonia, they called me and offered me the position. I was shocked. Thought there was no way, right? There's
Right.
no way. This is just we'll just see. And but man, God opened the door, and Chris and I again we talked about it, we prayed about it, and thought,
Mm.
life has been one adventure after another. This sounds like the next one, and we really felt like it was the right move. And so, in my foolishness, at our time, the superintendent was Brian Keim, and so I had followed up with him and said, "Hey, listen, offer accepted, right?
Hmm.
I've got a church that I lead down here, and I need like a month to because this was over Christmas break, okay." So now being in education, now I recognize how ludicrous this was, but at the time it seemed perfectly reasonable. I'm going, hey, I've got it I just need some transition time, okay? Like I've got to figure out how we're going to set up leadership here and whatever. And he goes, yeah, yeah, no problem. We just need you here in a week. I'm like, what?
1 week. Wow.
So we things went into hyperdrive, obviously, and again, God is faithful, right? Like we were able
Hmm.
to find a place to live up here. My wife and kids actually stayed in Livonia for a number of months. I lived up here by myself and would commute back and forth from Livonia for the first months there. We were in the midst of a renovation on the house that we bought up here, and so it was really an adventure, man. But that's how I ended up here. Is it really started with the idea of being able to approach ministry in a bivocational way, where
Yeah.
I'm not just working at church, I'm doing other stuff too.
Man, that's that's good. That's good. So coming back home, leaving, and then returning, how did that change your perspective coming back to your hometown?
Yeah, it changes everything. I think when you leave a place and come back, you realize how special it is. I think like most, and I hear our students say this all the time. Things like oh man, I can't wait to get out of here.
Uh huh.
Listen, I'm gonna tell you, here ain't that bad. Like it really isn't. And not to say that other people don't find a home in other places, but like my wife and I, when we left for Florida, we never planned on coming back to Michigan, let alone to the Thumb. And then when we moved back, it was, well, we never planned on coming back to the Thumb, well, and here we are. And so I think that our experiences being away from here, it kind of reinforces how special small community living is. Oh, there's something to be said about going to a school where most of the staff know your student, like they know them by name, they know who you are. You pass them at the grocery store and you recognize them. When we were in Livonia, I mean, our oldest son was actually born in Jacksonville, Florida, but he was in Livonia Public Schools before we moved back here. Well, Livonia Public Schools are huge, and they're great, but they're huge. And when you look at the difference of, he's in one elementary that's going to feed into upper elementaries, it's going to feed into a couple of middle schools, it's going to feed into three massive high schools.
Mm.
And that's different. That's a different experience of life. And so, some of it was we really wanted our kids to have that same small town childhood that we did, and the opportunities that come with that. Not there's anything wrong in living in larger communities and larger school systems at all. I'm not saying that at all, but like for us, we had an attachment to that. We recognized the benefits of it after leaving and how special it really is to be in small communities. So I think it's a greater appreciation for it. Things that as a high school student who doesn't know any better, you might be sitting there going, "Man, this sucks. I want to get out of here."
Right.
Well, with all of life on the table, it turns out here really isn't that bad.
Yeah. Yep. Not bad at all. So we're blessed to have the Comais here in the Thumb. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
What do people may misunderstand about you because they only see your public role?
That I'm mean. You know, I think that if you have people who only interact with me in on the athletic administrative side of things, I kind of jokingly told people like, athletic administration is a full contact sport. It really is. And so when you are dealing with issues, it could be with other schools, it could be, like athletics by nature is just highly competitive, and so that brings a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and so you're not running in circles where vulnerability is a strength, right? Vulnerability is recognized as a weakness, as something to expose rather than something to kind of lean into, and so it's a very different world. I think that for people who only interact with me in that way, like I said earlier, it's usually a conversation where I might be having to take something away from a kid, right? It might be an eligibility conversation, it might be a disciplinary conversation. A lot of my role is telling people no. While there's a number of definitions of leadership, I heard one time somebody say, "Hey, leadership is disappointing people at a pace that they can handle." That's a pretty narrow definition of leadership, but there's a lot of truth in it. Because if you're doing it right, it is going to come with a lot of disappointment. I think my role comes with disappointing people or frustrating people a lot. I think that that's just the nature of it. And I think that if somebody only interacts with me in that way, I think the misunderstanding could be that I'm mean. When in reality, like nothing could be further from the truth at this point, Cheyenne. I've been mean. I've been a very very nasty person. I have over the years. BC, right before Christ, like I've been a jerk. I used to jokingly tell our church, like, if you knew me 10 years ago, you would not like me. And everybody kind of
Yeah.
chuckles, and I'm like,
Right.
no, I'm super serious. So I think that would be one of the biggest misunderstandings. When in all reality, man, I am for them. I want the best experience for them. I want the best experience for their kids. I really do. I just, by the nature of my role, find myself in a position where I have to disappoint people a lot. I have to frustrate people a lot, and I have to be the quote unquote bad guy a lot. And so if you don't know me beyond just my role, you might think I'm mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Lakers are blessed to have you there in that role in that space. So yeah, keep doing the Lord's work. Continue on our lane with athletics and leadership. How do you help athletes who may tie their identity to their performance?
So, hey, that's a really important question. I think identity in general is a really important question right now for kids and adults. I think that, whether it's identity tied to work as an adult or hobbies, or whatever, or identity tied to sports for kids is a big deal. I don't know that I overtly, so I would talk about like two levels of influence, right? There's overt influence, which is just out in the open, and then there's kind of covert influence, which is kind of sneaky, right? And so, covert influence is a little bit quieter. I would say that one of my goals is to kind of covertly influence that identity issue by taking every opportunity for our kids to know that your mistakes don't define you. Like so when I'm dealing with an issue with a student, that it could be, like I said, a disciplinary conversation. You're not defined by that now for the rest of the time that you and I interact with each other, right? That's it. In fact, I assume that there's going to be change. I assume that there's going to be growth. I assume that when we know better, we do better, and that next time you're going to make a better decision, right? And the way that I approach that is my relationship with the kid doesn't change based on what they do wrong. And so I think rather than overtly going, hey, over and over and over again, your identity is not tied to your performance. Your identity is not tied to your performance. I covertly reinforce over and over and over again that uh, you're not your mistakes, right? And you're not your screw ups. You're not the most recent thing that you did wrong. My view of you doesn't change in that. I still love you. I still appreciate you. I still want what's best for you. That doesn't change. And so I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that is where my mind goes. Is um, I kind of try to approach it from the other side of that. I also, I guess, if there's one other thing I would say, Cheyenne, it's that I know a lot of our student athletes are running around with their performance gets reinforced by a lot of people, and I don't avoid that, but I also make sure that my interactions with them are not just based on, hey, good job last night, right? Hey, great game last night. That my interactions with them are not built around that, again, because I think covertly, what I'm trying to make sure they understand and recognize is that Mr. Comai is not just talking to me when I do something wrong or do something right. I actually want to talk to you all the time, right? And I don't really care. I'm glad you had a good game. Hey, listen, beating bad acts is always good. Can I say that on here? I don't know. You know what I mean? But like, right? But I mean, I'm joking, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't. I'm not just going to talk to you when you did something really well, or just talk to you when you did something really wrong. I'm going to talk to you all the time because I genuinely like you, I care about you, and I want what's best for
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. People over the mission. So I like that. Um,
you. Amen.
looking ahead there, so you have a cool opportunity to speak in May. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and give a little plug about your speaking engagement?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. So, I have the opportunity to preach at local churches. In fact, I'm in a stint right now with Salem Methodist Church here in Pigeon, filling the pulpit for a number of weeks. We're working through Ephesians. God has opened those doors, which has been awesome. It's not like I'm handing out business cards. I don't ask for that, right? It just kind of happens. And that is a passion of mine, as I've said earlier. Preaching and teaching and serving the local church is a passion of mine, and so I love doing it. Coming up in May, I recently was able to have some conversations with John Ward from over at Bayshore, and he had reached out to me and wanted to kind of touch base, and we've been kind of near each other, but never really communicated all that much, and we met and had some coffee, and he was sharing some great vision for some different things over at Bayshore coming up, and had extended a few invitations my way. And one of them was for a men's summit coming up in May, and it's an overnight experience. I've never been before, so I can't say, hey, I've been there before and it's awesome.
Right.
But I know what the plan is, and I know what the essence of it is from a spiritual standpoint. And so, um, it's to me, it's a great opportunity. I think that recognizing when I walk around right now, Cheyenne, and I bump into guys, it could be parents of students and student athletes. It could be guys that I run into that I play basketball with. Sometimes it could be whatever. Like when I run into dudes around here, I think that we have a lot of guys who are discontent with life. They're disconnected at home. They are, if we had to put a label on it, I think we have a lot more guys running around depressed than they would care to admit, and I mean in a legitimate way, probably clinically so. And I'm not qualified to diagnose that, so please don't misunderstand it. But I just think we do. I think we've got a lot of guys running around that are beat down and broken, have lost vision for life, clarity, and hope. And so what comes with that is guys will tend to bury that with a couple of different things, right? Like you either get some hobbies that are super expensive and time consuming, and then that becomes your identity, or you really lean into work and you become a workaholic, and then that kind of becomes your identity where you feel successful, and you lean into, it could be a drinking problem, it could be a drug problem, it could be a porn problem, it could be whatever. But as guys, we will mask what we're feeling with these other things to try to make that go away. And I think that if we really got honest, guys would recognize that what the enemy has you convinced is just a you thing is not just a you thing. It's an us thing. It's an everybody thing. I've checked plenty of those boxes myself, which I'm going to talk about in May when we get together. But God has a better way. God has a better plan. And what our communities really need is for men to be healthy, and for men to step up, and for men to have vision, and for men to have boldness, and for men to have confidence. Because when that happens, good things start happening in communities. When you look through the Bible and you look at the enemy's strategy for undermining a nation, it has a lot to do oftentimes with either killing young men, male. I mean, look through. Pharaoh wants to destroy all the boys of a certain age, right? Like King Herod wants to kill all the boys of a certain. Over and over and over again, we see this tactic of the enemy, because if he can undermine men, if he can distract men, if he can beat men down with lies, and distract them just enough from the vision and the purpose that God has for their life, he can take them out of the game. And that's what's happening a lot right now. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together, say, hey, enough is enough. We're going to get together. We're going to open up God's word. We're going to worship. We're going to pray. I'm going to preach. We're going to spend some time unpacking this. And man, God willing, we're all going to walk out of there a little bit better and a little closer to Him than when we left, or than when we got there. And in our families, in our communities, in our workplaces are going to be better because of it.
Hmm. That's good. So yeah, check it out in Bayshore Camp in May. Men's retreat.
Men's Summit, I think, is what it shows up on. Yep. Yeah, check it out. And again, I'd be happy to answer questions. Like I said, I'm a kind of a guest there. I'm preaching, but I've never been before to this event. But yeah, anybody has any questions, they can hit me up. I'm happy to answer what I know.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So shout out to Bayshore Camp, man. They do a lot of great things here around the thumb. So um,
They do.
I want to change lanes to your parenting. You and Krista got a couple boys, and it's cool to see you. Another side note, see you coaching the little ones. But as far as like
Yeah.
creating memories with your kids, like what stems as far as like fun things that you and Krista do to help create some fun memories with your boys.
Well, I think I have to first say my wife is amazing at this. She has a gift for memory making, for creating experiences. Like, and maybe that's just like a husband wife thing. Like, I don't know, like I'll just show up, I'll be like, this is awesome. Like, can you believe this? She's like, yeah, actually I can believe it because I spent 12 hours planning this and putting it all together and setting it up. So yes, I can believe that this was that awesome. And, but she's tremendously gifted at that. I think that, so there's certainly those moments, where whether it's birthdays or family getaways or whatever, where she is going above and beyond to make those memorable for the boys, and for us as a family, really. I think also for she and I both, it's just being present. I do get to coach. My youngest, I've coached him for 2 years now in youth basketball, which is fun. I've been able to, I volunteer to chaperone as many class trips as I can for my oldest. To make sure that I get to be a part of those experiences with them, if at all possible. We've got some getaways, some stuff built into our rhythm of life where, we love to get up to the lake and we love to fish and we love to, do those things. We're highly active in the local fair. Our both of our boys have animals that they show at the fair, and we have projects, and we're part of 4-H, and boys will be part of FFA when they get a little older. So, I think the main thing is being present as much as we can, which is not easy, Cheyenne. I mean, we have, as everybody does, we have very busy schedules, right? So finding time to do that is not always easy. It is worth it though, and so I think that the biggest, I don't know that we have a strategy, like we haven't hammered anything out, but if I look at what we do consistently, it's just trying to be present. Showing up is a big part of it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. As we prepare to close here, thinking about your life, what would you say is one lesson life taught you that you wish you could tell your younger self?
That's a really good question. I think that the big one, because there's a lot of impact by this one, is treat people well. I've been very guilty over the years, and I've made mention of it here. Like, you go back to middle and high school, and I mean, man, I was a punk. I just was, like, I was an absolute jackrabbit, and I was not very nice. I had a very short temper. I was very highly competitive. Some of that stuff bled over into, early adulthood, like I had mentioned, kind of BC, right before Christ, and God's done a great work in my heart. I think that when I look back over, I don't like, I'm not a person that would look back and say I have regrets all that often, because, I think all of our life, like, God is sovereign, right? So all of these experiences were necessary to turn me into who I am today. And I like who I am today. And so it's tough for me to look back and go, hey, I would have done that differently. I don't know, because if I'd have done that differently, then it would have changed other things. But if there's one thing I would say, I wish I would have done better, is just treat people well. If when I look back over things that maybe I do regret, things that maybe, you know, have come back around to impact my life in different ways, not always for the better, or when I look back at the ways that I probably made some people feel in different seasons of life, I hurt a lot of people the years with my behavior, with my temper, with my competitiveness, with my, some of it at a very small level that if you were to ask them today, they probably wouldn't even remember the interaction. To some that I have no doubt have left a mark on people for a lifetime. And really it comes down to how I would treat people. And so, I would say, and again, I'm not trying to make it sound like this was last week, right? Like this is years and years and years of growth and development. And so, um, again, by dumb luck and the grace of God, that doesn't really happen all that often anymore. I'm not perfect, but I like to think I am, by God's grace, much better at that now, and I believe that. So, but if I could go all the way back, I would say treat people well, because there's a lot that comes out of that over the course of a lifetime.
That's good. That's good. Be like Jesus. Yeah, treat people well. So,
Amen.
yeah, Bill, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast, man. I'm encouraged as always. Anyone I have on the podcast, but you are a saint. You any circles I'm a part of, when your name is dropped, nothing but good things, and you're just a humble guy. Loves the Lord, right? Loves people by way of your character and just how you treat people. And so, yeah, thank you for being on here and just sharing parts of your story. So, thoroughly enjoyed it and was highly encouraged. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that very much. I do, and likewise, man. I love, I love all that you get to be a part of, and kind of watching you move around and shake and coach, and and do ministry and life, and wife and kids, and impact for the kingdom, all of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So only God. That's the only thing I can. If you got
That's it.
nothing from this episode, only God.
Yeah, that's right.
So, well, folks, thanks so much for hopping on here, checking out this episode with Mr. Bill Comai. And so, be blessed, be encouraged, and we're out.